The very last resolution of the Southern Governors Forum meeting that held in Enugu is that the next president of Nigeria must come from Southern Nigeria. Segun Sowunmi, a PDP member, joins me to take a look at these developments. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Must, shall, may, should, but the Southern Governors choose must with emphasis. Either or nothing. That's the ordinary meaning. Do you see it that way?
Well, let me start by saying thank you very much for inviting me. For some times now, I have been asking myself, what really is going on in the country? Now, the background to why I was querying what's going on in the country is that the whole concept of nation state is, it's generally accepted to have started by the Westphalian Treaty of about 1648 or thereabout, about 400 years. The height of that idea is globalization at the world level. And having done globalization, we have seen that the concept of nation state itself is already, taking a back seat and is decaying, because you now see hitherto champions of globalization falling back to nationalism. And if you look within them, France, Germany, England, and all that, you can tell that nation state theory is beginning to fail, and in its position is city-state concepts. So when you try to dovetail that to Nigeria, you will have an imagination that why are things the way they are in terms of the narrative and the energy that is put into the things that divide us. And with profound respect to governors of the southern part of the country, I have systematically watched them, and I have thought that they have not been as moderate, as guarded, and as, not wanting to call them, I don't want to use the word irresponsible, but to the whole idea of an indivisible, stable nation because of the rhetorics. Yes, it is good to have a place where they meet. But I would think that where they meet would be a place where they take their southern peculiarities, but they give it national tone because it's one nation.
Yes, now
they have got to
let me come in here. The meeting of the Southern Governors Forum, deliberating on issues affecting the South. Now, they are all members of also the Nigeria Governors Forum, where they deliberate on issues affecting the nation. Will it not amount to some problems if the Southern Governors Forum will delve into issues Nigerian Governors Forum should?
No, I didn't tell them to delve. I said the tonality. You picked the word must. And on the strength of must, what we have seen is that there has been a need for the northern part of the country to throw forward replies that only adds more petrol to the fire. But you have to look at the cause effect to say who did what first before this was done. Let me give you some examples before we get to the governorship issue or the presidency issue. First, there is crisis in the country. With profound respect, it's a crisis that I even believe that the Nigerian actors, the leaders of the country, have not analyzed deeply to say why. You can't see the entire Sahel belt of Nigeria having the issues that it has, burden on fundamentalism, the arms and all of that, the porousness of the border, the treaties that allow people to move in and out anyhow, and you're seeing the effect in the northern part of the country, where truly, if our humanity is not dead, we must cringe at the level of killings, dyings, maiming, dislocations, and all of the happening to our northern brothers. What was the position that one tend to see this group of Southern Governors Forum take? They were more interested in coming to the table with a narrative that suggests that, a protected or safe South is more important than a protected or saved country, forgetting that you cannot have safety in your comfort zone when the larger area is the way it is. I thought, why are they talking like this? Okay. Then we run into the issue of fiscal federalism, which borders on the usage of money and how we do resources. And I also saw very, very quickly, they wanted to play to advantage. If you ask the areas that are able to generate the best money from this sales tax that you call VAT, and you try to think...
Consumption tax.
Yes, consumption tax. You try to think that, really, what great natural efforts have the citizens of each of these enclaves done to make the posterity so? And what great impact or new thinkings have the present occupiers of the seats of governors in this state put on the table? They have only been harvesting from many years of investment from the entire country.
Now, the Northern Governors Forum has been in existence for years, if not decades now, and the Southern governors have formed their own union, their own group. Is there anything wrong with that?
No.
So some even said they were too late in forming such a forum.
Yes, but maybe because they are new at it. They haven't learned that the biggest masquerade does not make the biggest noise at the beginning of a conversation. You will hardly hear Northern Governors Forum use that platform to make very tough comments that could rub the other parts of the country wrong. Rather, you will have pseudo-cultural organizations, you will have other people making those comments, giving the governors the opportunity to calm frayed nerves, to intervene. Now, when the ones that are the top players in terms of at the subnational level, mini presidents, if you want to call them that, are now the ones that are infusing so much of these kinds of issues. The question then is, who will then calm those frayed nerves? Especially now, when somehow the other part of the country has taken it upon themselves that we have taken too many blows, therefore we want to start returning like for like. Why would people who have a responsibility to manage the diversity of Nigeria, why would they be allowing that to happen?
Some may say this issue did not start now, that we saw such rhetoric in 2015, where governors, chieftains of parties, well-respected citizens were saying the presidency must come to the north.
I think, again, that we have gotten to the presidency matter. I think we have to also go back to some fundamentals. The whole idea of zoning within political parties, not in the First Republic, not in the Second, and certainly not in this Republic, it has never been a cross-party conversation where all parties sit down and take these decisions. You will remember in the earlier Republic, Nnamdi Azikiwe was a presidential candidate, Awolowo was, and Tafawa Bello, all of them were. In this Republic of this one that we are in, if that's what we want to use, the issues that produced June 12 and causing Nigeria to become a pariah state created a necessity for that narrative. But that narrative is not a final bus stop. It's a conversation that must constantly be interrogated based on the challenges that countries are facing. For instance, what are the challenges of today? Do the challenges of today require us to have a much more global thinking around the skill set we need before we start talking about the placement? There's also another issue that I want us to talk about. At what point in time do the conversation of zoning really take place? You do zoning when the party caucuses are at a point where they want to decide where they want to indicate, but not necessarily legislate. Because the law does not even allow you to preclude anybody who is interested, notwithstanding your zoning, from trying his luck. Then again, there's an issue. Before in Nigeria, we used to worry about only 3 zones: the north, the west, and the east. It is for national cohesion and better peace that, in the wisdom of the Abacha regime, we now have 6 geopolitical zones. Therefore, when you hear the conversation around zoning, you must ask, are the ones talking about zoning hypocritically avoiding to be more specific on equity. What do I mean? Nigeria has 6 geopolitical zones that we're on. If the champions of it must go south are Yorubas, then you must ask them, what equity and what justice are you demanding for when you've had president for 8 years, vice president now going to almost 8 years? If it is a south-south, then you must ask them, what equity are you asking for when you've had vice president for almost 3 years, president for about 5 years? It therefore means that if the Southern governor were to talk about equity, they must be brave enough to say the equity we are talking about here is an Igbo president.
Is it not left for, yes, at the first level, the governors were united under one umbrella, Southern governors. Now, I talked of the larger Nigerian governors forum. There also exist some other subgroups. The Southeast Governors Forum, Southwest, South-South. Is it not their responsibility now to begin to talk of microzoning?
Please.
To specific political
if you
zones?
allowed me to finish my thought, you will get why I said we cannot stand underneath zoning and equity and hypocritically pretend as if we don't know where the equity challenge is. Now you come to the north. We have not created a north that resembles only the northwest. In that same north, we still have to deal with the issue of the northeast that has never produced presidency in this country since the days of, I don't even think Tafawa Balewa was a president. He was just a prime minister.
That's the head of government.
You know, there was a president.
Ceremonial.
It doesn't matter what you call it.
The head of government was a prime minister.
The constitutional adjustment of roles and responsibility is purely your baby. The role and the responsibility of head of government can either be a monarchy or a president. They have never had.
But they had,
now,
the prime minister had executive powers.
Don't worry about that. Come to the role of the North Central, the ones you like to call the Middle Belt. Is there a reason why we would think that in talking equity, we have also eliminated them? Because we are dangerously tilting towards a conversation in this country where when we're talking about who can produce power, who should lead the country, who can get the job done, we're talking about the Northwest and mirroring it as the entire North, and we're probably talking about the Southwest and pretending that we don't know that the issues are. Why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because there comes a time in the history of a nation where they must look themselves in the eye and say, right now where we are in a mess. We're in a mess on the economy. We're in a mess in social stabilization. We're in a mess in national cohesion. We're in a mess in security. We're in a mess with debt. We're in a mess with so many things. Therefore, you will now begin to say, who is best able to solve some of this problem? And in looking for who can solve the problem, you must then think that, okay, how do we get someone that everybody gets something? Nobody leaves empty-handed. Maybe nobody gets 100%, but everybody gets something. Now, when we elevate the conversation to that level, then we will now begin to say, who has the ability, the reach, to call people to the table and just beg them to give this unity and this country a chance? And we'll now have the instrument of power to probably, make those
that should be the criteria.
That ought to be the criteria.
Okay, now, for the North Central, they have had 3 former heads of state. Ibrahim Babangida, military. Abdulsalami Abubakar and Yakubu Gowon.
If you put it that way, it even gets worse. Because even the Southeast have had military head of state.
Yes.
So it therefore means that therefore means that if you put the military head of state into the equation, then we are left with.
But you're looking at the democratic.
If you put it in. If you put in the military equation, all the people that have been, then you are going to see clearly that the only place that has to be screaming about equity, justice, and fairness in this country today is the Northeast. You can't find any.
And we talked of the prime minister coming from there.
No, you just told me about military head of state.
I'm just also bringing that in.
Don't shift the goalpost. I'm not canvassing yet for any region, so to speak.
We're just putting the facts on the table.
Now, if you put the facts on the table, if you throw in the mix of military head of state, then automatically the Southeast can no longer claim they've never led. The only one that will be left is the South, not northeast. If
That's
you
for the military.
Yeah, if you remove that.
But for the executive,
if you remove
Northeast
that,
has also enjoyed it.
how?
I talked of the Prime Minister.
Sir, do you know the difference between a president and a prime minister?
What I told you was that the Prime Minister had executive powers.
Don't worry. Let me
before you come in, and the President had ceremonial powers, and the Prime Minister was the head of government.
Please.
Am I wrong?
Who is the head of the Great Britain? It's the Queen. We are not talking about what big responsibilities.
Head of the Great Britain?
The British, they run a monarchy.
Yes.
It's just.
But we have a Prime Minister.
Hear me out.
That forms and runs the government.
Let me explain to you. We are not talking about what residual responsibility you give state actors.
Who forms and runs the government under that kind of arrangement?
What we are talking about is who leads absolutely. And when we're talking about
does the president form a government? Does he run a government?
When you run,
are they not the responsibilities of the Prime Minister?
It's like saying that you don't accept that the king of Saudi Arabia is the head of that country.
That's a different scenario.
I'm saying, look, I'm trying to tell you.
Because it's embedded. Both offices are embedded in one.
Let's not waste all our time on this one conversation. What I'm trying to say to you is this, and I stand by that. The country is divided now for purpose of inclusion, equity, and stability into 6 zones. And we must, especially Southerners, we mustn't pretend that we do not know that the North is into 3 zones. And we mustn't pretend that the demography and even the inflections and the attitude and the culture of each of these zones differs slightly. And therefore, we must not insist that once we talk about the Northwest, we have taken care of the whole North. Otherwise, when we talk about the Southwest, then the whole South must be considered to have taken care of. But you know that is not true. Even in spite of the South having taken 2 years or 2 terms of presidency, 2 terms of vice president, you know that we're still talking about the micro issues there, even on a global national scale. Therefore, we will talk about the Nigerian issue, even when it concerns the North, in that same microcosm of where are the zones. And please, again, one other thing. All through the years that PDP was in charge of this country, we are the party. PDP is the party that does equity or tries to do equity. All of the time we were here, we always tried to do this national balance. Even in 2019, we were equitable enough to know that we produced a candidate from the Northeast. Notwithstanding the numbers, we backed it up with a candidate from the Southeast. Why? You think we're not aware that in the numbers game, this Northwest, Southwest is always big? But we knew that you can't insist only on that. Now, the people who have never, in all of their history, bother about equity or fairness, the people who, when they are even in charge of the country, they are not even able to keep national cohesion, they are not able to respect the principle of federalism, are now the ones suddenly with the loudest voice on equity, when you know that there is a thing of hypocrisy laced in it. 4, they would then come and tell us that we are going to have a nation where we are going to be passing the baton only between the Northwest and the Southwest. And
who are these people you're referring to?
Your friends who are making the loudest noise underneath a shared platform of governors, certain governors.
Okay, you raise a critical point, microzoning, that if indeed talk of which parts, in terms of the 2 divides, North and South, if you want equity, fairness, and justice, like they said, you should also extend that to issue of microzoning. And you also raise the issue of some plots to rotate the government between Northwest and Southwest. Is that really the case in this issue of the Southern governors?
You have to look at what has happened. In 1999, someone that is my father, in the person of Obasanjo, became president. We put the vice presidency, because of PDP, in the Northeast. By 2007, the PDP again, we were reasonable, responsible, equitable enough to say, okay, if we're going to the Northeast, let us go to the South-South. By 2019, we were also responsible and reasonable enough and equitable enough and inclusive enough to say, okay, if we go to the Northeast, it's time to start giving the Southeast a pathway to power because of the number games.
What about 2015? Some persons believe the PDP got it wrong in not giving it to the North.
You know, the funny thing is that the office of president for political parties is an anathema that we have created a structure in our political participation at party level which is so idiotic that the president is so revered, almost becoming a king or a monarch, and therefore his own wish is the wish of the party. And you can see it cascading into governors who will probably be coming from nowhere begging people to give them tickets and all that, now insisting, just because everybody has worked to make them governor, they are now the alter ego, the owners, the only force within political party. That's not how you can build sustainable parties.
Okay, let's go back to that Southwest-Northwest alliance. And there were reports that there was this agreement, even before or the time APC was being formed, that the power has to move from that northern part of western part of the north to the western part of the south.
Any agreement that is against good judgment, against equity, against fairness, against integrity must be jettisoned, because a fair-minded creator of the world will not expect people to behave in spite of what they can see in an unfair manner. The fact remains that if we continue with that type of thinking, we are going to injure large part of this country who will legitimately be feeling that there's a glass ceiling on their head. And the fact that northern extractions, northeast and middle belt and all that, the fact that they are more guided, the fact that they are more able to hold things in and manage it and just endure, does not mean that we're going to be blind to those realities. There can be no justice in Nigeria if you are talking about an arrangement that does not remember that if your sole interest is equity, then that your equity must have some opportunity for choice. It must include the northeast, it must include the southeast, and it must include the north central. You can't weave the argument any other way. Now, if you agree to that, because obviously, let us say for the purpose of 1993, they've not been that, then even if those candidates don't even win, you would have sent a message that nobody is excluding anybody. And among the challenges that we have in the country today, outside national cohesion, we still have to build the economy. I laugh at every kindergarten who thinks that where Nigeria is today, they have the ability and the power to manage. Most of them don't. There's no track record to suggest that with the level of debt that the irresponsible APC government is piling up in the country, they forget that there's something called donor fatigue. You can become president in 2023, and for the first 6 months, all the nations of the world will not even be willing to extend new credit. They'll be calling you out to come and renegotiate. You need somebody that
That's
can...
debt fatigue.
You need, debt fatigue. You need someone that can do that. You can find yourself in a situation where, okay, let's just spin it for argument's sake. Some of the policies of the Buhari regime needs to be reversed. Can you imagine for a second if somebody from the southern part of the country started to reverse it? Do you know how immediately it begins to communicate, oh, they are victimizing, or they are this, that. I didn't create that scenario in the country. Therefore, you need somebody in the country today that can be trusted, even if it is with a bit of, holding our breath.
Okay. Now, I recall that Yar'Adua reversed some of the Obasanjo's policies, and is from the other side of the country. But
Yes.
now, most people agreed that now that there's mutual distrust, suspicions, perhaps hatred among the ethnic nationalities in Nigeria. Now, what you are putting on the table is that the next president must be decided solely on capacity and capability and competence.
Do you know the extent to which I've thought?
And rather than on these other sentiments. Now, you understand the flowing sentiments on ground. Selling this message to the people, wouldn't it be a Herculean task?
Do you know the extent to which I've gone on this same thing? At a point, I started asking myself that, okay, look, just look at the whole country. Who has been managed over time by the creator, putting him in a blast furnace, burning him, throwing away all the shaft, to prepare them for maybe this scenario that maybe from the beginning of time, it had always been predicted that we'll be here. I could only think of two names. I could think of Ibrahim Babangida, but he doesn't have the hell to carry it now. If Babangida had the hell to carry it, whatever it is that we're talking about, he can handle it. The only other person I can think of, with profound respect to everybody's sensibility, is Atiku Abubakar. Why? Because I know these things that needs to be done, he gets it. He doesn't need to convince anybody anymore on those things. He gets it. He gets that we must refocus the North in a manner that the North become productive for the North and probably outpace other areas. The policy direction that needs to go there, he gets it. He gets that we must reduce the enormous power we put in the presidency so that other section of the country, he gets it. He doesn't need to convince me. He gets that you must manage free nerves. He gets that you must build consensus. He gets that you must reach out to almost every ethnic nationality, including even the House of Fulani, to try and beg them to give the country. He gets it. And he has all the Perikusan administrative experience to hit the ground running the next day. You can't afford a president who will be looking up in the clouds and guessing and figuring out what...
You think the ground running is very important for 2023 because there's a lot of work to be done.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the two men, Ibrahim Babangida and Atiku Abubakar. I said Ibrahim Babangida can do it, but because of age limitations. But you believe Atiku can also do it. But not too long ago, when Ibrahim Babangida turned 80, in an interview, he described the person, the ideal person for 2023.
You know the problem with idealism? The problem with idealism is that when you have heard idealism from your leader, you now have to go and, create a tailor-measured garment that will fit that idealism. And you may find out that in trying to picture perfectly describe that idealism, some other variables have to be introduced. The only thing that he introduced that could maybe be a sticking term is the age barrier. The challenge is, I challenge you. Think about it now, where the country is, with the variety of experience, the rich, and all that. Who in Nigeria today, within that age grade, can really be expected? Let me tell you where Nigeria is. Nigeria is at a point where a very elderly man, very wealthy, plenty of wives and plenty of children, he lived his life not managing the diversity within his children. And now he's coming to the twilight of his life, he's about to die. And he realizes that, hey, if I don't do something fast, my children are going to pick kugels and fight themselves and destroy everything. And then he now decides that, okay, let me use my last push to bring them to the middle. Let me use my last push to readjust it so that when I am not there, they can take off as a united family. That's where we are. And in that mode, I tell you this, no, Atiku Abubakar cannot even tell me that this effort we're talking about is about him. No! If anything, it is even calling him out to come and give back and clear the mess that the 60s generation created.
It seems you're on early campaign mode now.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Dude, do you know what will happen to us if we produce a president that will go and fail? When Muhammadu Buhari was coming, I wasn't in his party. And the day they were inaugurating him, I was abroad. So I couldn't really be influenced by the comments of the people around me. You could only watch it on social media. And what watching something on social media does for you is that it gives you the opportunity to be reading the comments. Guess what? You cannot imagine the amount of comprehensive global goodwill that it was bringing. But guess what? If the performance, the low-hanging fruit, the things the people want to see, if it doesn't happen, that's why we're in this mess. Ordinarily, after a Buhari, we should not even be needing to be looking at where, how, and who somebody came from. But here we are. For some reason or the other, we are where we are. And the northern flank of our country, the Sahel flank of Africa, is too destabilized for now, that you need somebody who can look them in the eye and tell them, gentlemen, this nonsense that we do to ourselves has gone on for too long. We need to stop. And can look at the other people and say, gentlemen, I get your agitation, but here we are now. We are the most populous black nation on earth. We are arguably the hope of the black race. And in being the hope of the black race, we cannot be talking as if we don't even understand that the color of our skin and the pigmentation of our eyes makes us one people under heaven,
now,
within the nation Nigeria.
You said based on the prescription of what the next president should be from the former military president Ibrahim Babangida, it will be difficult for someone in the age bracket you mentioned to achieve that, about 64. A lot of young people will find this very offensive. Let me give you the opportunity.
Am I old? I'm young. They can be offensive.
Let me give you an opportunity to clarify. Do you think that if we set very well, because there are young people in their early 40s leading countries with bigger economies and all that, do you think that if we search better, we can get the people under this bracket?
Listen, my brother, I gave you a similitude to drive home the point. There are loads of young people. I am here. We can lead the country. But the challenge is that we need somebody to clear the minefield. Part of the minefield that needs to be cleared is the minefield of trust. Part of the minefields that needs to be cleared is the framework of institutional development and national cohesion. How do we even exist as a people? Part of the landmines that needs to be cleared is sorting out the economy. Part of the landmines that needs to be cleared is renegotiating our loans to give us another exit. Part of the landmines that needs to be cleared is repairing our civil service for efficiency. Part of the landmark that needs to be cleared is preparing and mentoring young people to take over. And I'll give you one example as one of them. I'll drive home the point. The worst scenario that has taken place in this world, as far as human history is concerned, is the Second World War. In spite of all of the things that took place during the Second World War, when it was time for them to commence the recreation of that country, guess who they picked? They were not stupid when they picked Konrad Adenauer, one of the people that was even with the Third Reich to tell you, go and clean the mess. Why do you think General Babangida in his wisdom had no choice but to leave Abacha behind when everything had become a mess? Because he knew that if you didn't have somebody like that to clean the mess, you couldn't even translate to the democracy.
And protect the new government.
You couldn't even get into
democracy
ended up very well.
Like the guard dog devouring the...
The point is this. Do not be fixated on the human frailties. Look at the big ideas of what they did and what they were able to achieve. Do you know how we were then? The banks were failing. Commerce was breaking. The country was at dagger neck with himself. For whatever it was, we were able to manage and step over that. We are in a worse situation. If you ask me, if you truly ask me, I'm looking for a president that can get the job done. And in that mode of a president that can get the job done, I'm actually looking for someone that can be understudying him as a vice president, that can be aided to get the job done when the baton has been passed. And none of this is easy to achieve. Anybody will give the saddle and the responsibility of being president now, wherever we decide, has a lot of work to do.
And the critical among these work, some people have said, is the disunity in the country, that perhaps the biggest challenge before the next president may not even be economic or whatever, but making the country to remain one, getting rid of all the cracks on our wall. How will you speak to that?
The easiest cracks to deal with is the cracks in the South. The biggest challenge and the bigger crack to deal with is the crack in the North. And for you to deal with the crack in the North, it's almost like you're going to your mother's children and you're telling them, my brothers, this that we are doing we can no longer do. We need to change it. And they must be willing to understand that that change must take place, because they must trust that you are not taking that decision to hurt them. We will just have a perpetual basket case in our hand if we don't think about it this way. Politicians, in their element, they are only always looking for where their personal interest can best be fitted. But statesmen must elevate the conversation a little bit further and do an imagination of what and who can work. And if the description fits one of you, if you are lucky to have somebody like that, then you must have to say, okay, you think that the person we're talking about, you think he's not human? Do you know the huge emotional investment it takes to even get up every morning and be him? And all of these things, I'm saying very, very poignantly that perhaps all of these things, all of this pain was to prepare the fellow for the time we're in now. Because in 2015 when Buhari was coming, no Nigerian could have predicted that we are going to be in this kind of situation. But here we are. We have found ourselves here and we need to repair it.
Now, we won't talk of 2023 presidency without talking about a credible electoral process.
Thank you.
It's hinged. That's where it starts from, the polls actually reflecting the wishes of the people.
You know, the type of country we have even makes it all the more important that we have a leader whose mind is robust, is active, is open to new ideas that can be implemented using the instrumentality of office. If you want to clean up your electoral act, really clean it up, as far as I am concerned, two things must occupy your mind. The first is, how do you ensure that a larger percentage of those who are eligible participate? There's an example in Brazil. I know who I'm talking about. Those kinds of things can easily be implemented. The next thing we will talk about is that, are we looking for an electoral process that gives advantage to one section and makes the other section disadvantaged? Of course, the answer has to be no. We're looking for an electoral process on its own that has integrity, and it does not matter where you apply it, the integrity will still stand. These are things that a leader who has access, who has, that knowing who to call where, can bring people to say, gentlemen, we are now in problem. This is the fourth industrial revolution. Nation states are failing all around us. Nations are reverting back to their nationalistic tendencies. Are we not going to prepare ourselves for the future? In preparing ourselves for the future, what kinds of decisions do we need to be taking now? And who and who and who? If you ask me, we need somebody who can form a government of national unity, because the person understands where we are. But that government of national unity must not be a government without competence. If the government has competence and it also has the intention of national unity, we will all say, oh, finally, we're on our way there. And for our population and our size, we can filibuster all we like, scream and shout all we like. Our reality and our mess must be confronted by ourselves.
In 30 seconds, the electoral process, the amendment of the Electoral Act, you saw the issue of electronic transmission of results. What will it bring? The president is yet to react to that bill, I believe, that is presently before him.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are insisting that electronic transmission of results is a capsule that solves all the problem. But what I have been asking myself is that if you are to transmit the result electronically, is it not going to be fed by one human being into that electronic process? So what am I saying to you? I'm saying that we have been improving our Electoral Act systematically. The only person that has not had any improvement to it is the present APC government. So they should add whatever improvement they can add to it. But we will constantly be looking to improve the Electoral Act in such a way that at every point in time, we are solving the problems that we can see and that can make our election process have bigger integrity. I'm even more interested in an Electoral Act that strengthens and compels INEC to force parties to operate the principle of, how everybody comes in, what they call democratic equity.
Internal party
democracy.
Okay.
Thank you, that's the word I was looking for. I'm even looking for a situation where INEC could be so enforced that parties are now compelled to know that internal party democracy works. A situation where you carry the whole ESCO of a state and give it to
But there's an extent to which INEC can do that. It boils down to the individual parties subscribing to that democratic ethos over time.
Over time. One of the things that really depresses me is the ease with which people win election on one party and dumps another. It's a lot of, it's very
Well,
frustrating.
that's a
These are the kinds of
conversation for
things.
another time. Thank
But
you so
we have
much.
to find a way to make it happen.
Absolutely. We continue to improve our, not just the electoral process, but also our democratic process.